nu na school. Kakneen men en chachwa mu akwan. Alkswint look asses. Kalt cook be kachikta de kuntinach as us as la sasu akspien will my yaus. Kalt cook be you eat skakaltin mention. Oh.
My heartfelt gratitude to Kia Amona Jules for starting us off in a good way. We are going to be dealing with some difficult topics today, so it's so good to hear our language spoken, to connect ourselves to the greater than ourselves as well. At this time, I'm going to invite all the speakers who are able to join us in person today to come join me on the stage on either side of me. So I'm asking for all of our in-person speakers. We have a few that are also joining us virtually today, and we thank you as well for being prepared, and we're glad that you're ready to go with us. So, Chuchinu, my name is Rissel Coy. I'm also known as Starlight Thunderhorse. I'm also known as Laloya. I'm also known by some other names from different ceremonies, and I'm honored today to serve as the moderator for today's public presentation, as well as for the media event that will immediately follow. My family hails from Canoe Creek First Nation as well as the Lower Statliam area. I am a member of Shamakwam First Nation, which is the Lower Statliam, but I am very closely connected, and I honor my Shwetmuk relatives from the Northern Shwetmuk Tagalmuk, and I'm really delighted and honored to be here today in Shwetmuk Ulu. We recognize the territory of our Shwetmuk ancestors today and where we're coming to you from. We have a full agenda today. For those of you who heard me talking just before we officially got started, we are, please, again, the speakers, I'm going to ask you to come forward while I'm talking. Please come forward. Cookby Roseanne, Sarah, others. If National Chief is here already, if she could please join us. When she gets here, we invite her to join us. I know she's, there you are. Thank you so much. So we are very fortunate, as you just heard me say. We have the Assembly of First Nations National Chief joining us today, and who will be providing some remarks. When I sent out the initial schedule, that was not yet confirmed, so we have expanded our timeline by a little bit to accommodate. Please take a seat. We have expanded our timeline by a little bit to accommodate that, so I trust your discretion with that as well, and ability to accommodate that. To also be clear to all media, I know some media asked prior, I've confirmed with many, but if you're wondering, we absolutely encourage you to live stream this event. We also, for all people who are witnessing this around the world, please invite people to share and bear witness on this important event today. So with that, it is my pleasure to call upon to Kamloops to Shwetmuk Cookby, Roseanne Kashmir, for some opening remarks.
Waiko Paitip, Cookby Roseanne Kashmir, Winsquest, the Kamloops to Shwetmuk. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to the Kamloops to Shwetmuk Cultural and Language Revitalization Department for starting us off in a very good way by singing the welcome song and welcoming all of you here today. Also, I would like to say a heartfelt Cooksjatchum to Kia Mona Jules for starting us off in a good way with the grounding, the much needed grounding that we needed through prayer to the Creator, and Cooksjam. So as we begin this public presentation today, I want to begin by acknowledging Indian residential school survivors and intergenerational survivors. There are no words sufficient to express the comfort and love that we wish to express to all of you today. We see you, we love you, and we believe you. I also want to acknowledge all of the communities that are grappling with their recent findings. We grieve with you in this confirmation of further missing children at other Indian residential schools. We stand with you and we move forward on to the next steps to address these heart-wrenching findings. Cookschatcham, to the Kamloops to Schwetmuk Council, and members for joining me today. It is together that we can face such daunting work and ensure as caretakers that we move forward with deepest respect and love for these missing children. I stand here today strong because of the immense support that start both with our community and that I have received from the community since the news broke out on May 27th. I am so thankful to be joined today by Schwetmuk Kusautans, our Schwetmuk relatives from across Schwetmuk-Gulu. I also want to say Cookschatcham and thank you to Splatsin Cookby Wayne Christian, who is here with us, Nisconlith Cookby Judy Wilson, Canoe Creek Cookby Hank Adam, also to Phyllis Webstad, ambassador and a founder of the Orange Shirt Society. I would also like to say that we also have Sid Leckie from the city RCMP, and we also have William Wallace and Dee with us today from our local detachment. Additionally, I also want to thank the following people for joining me today. The Assembly of First Nations National Chief Roseanne Archibald. The British Columbia Assembly of First Nations Regional Terry Chiji, who is also with us. The Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs Vice President, Chief Don Tom, as well as Secretary Treasurer, Cookby Judy Wilson. First Nations Summit Executive Robert Phillips. And our friend, the City of Kamloops Mayor, Ken Christian. So we are here today because Indian residential school survivors and intergenerational survivors who were unrelenting in carrying those painful truths about missing children forward. From those who witnessed the abuse and neglect that could have led to death, to those who required to dig graves. We are forever thankful for your willingness to carry this burden of truth forward so that we could verify that knowing, confirming with science, and where some of the missing children's current resting place is located on the grounds of the Kamloops Indian Residential School. For everyone joining us today, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks. As you are bearing witness, and in doing so, you are ensuring that Indian residential school survivors are finally being heard about the deaths of children in the residential schools after so many years of silence and disbelief. You are bearing witness to a very important truth about Indigenous people and Canada. It has been referred to as a historic, dark chapter. But Indigenous people are very much alive with the repercussions that they're living today. I am so thankful for the inner strength and the fortitude that I have witnessed Indigenous people draw upon to continue forward despite the current and historic impacts that we shoulder. As I begin to delve further into the harsh reality regarding the missing children, I first wish to remind everyone this is heavy truth. For those present in person, I would like to remind you that we have cultural and wellness supports in the adjacent room across the hall. For those joining us remotely, please know that there are crisis lines that are publicly available and have been well publicized. The Kamloops Indian Residential School was run by the Roman Catholic Church, albeit that words of regret and remorse have been expressed by local and regional Roman Catholic representatives. There has never been an apology from the highest level of the Roman Catholic Church. To be clear, the Roman Catholic Church has repeatedly refused to accept responsibility or formally apologize for its direct role in the numerous and horrific abuses committed by Indigenous and children through the residential school system. Despite having operated over 70% of all residential schools in Canada, they sought to reduce their obligations to contribute funds to reconciliation purposes. In 2016, Canada permitted the Catholic entities to escape their requirement to raise at least $25 million as part of the class action settlement, leaving only $4 million that they raised for these purposes, excusing the $21 million obligation that was unfulfilled. As we think about the Roman Catholic Church, let us all recollect that it was the federal government of Canada that mandated the Indian residential school system. In addition, the federal government that passed the law that permitted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to forcibly remove children from their families and communities to be enrolled in Indian residential schools. We are not here for retaliation. We are here for truth-telling. We are here today to honor the missing children in our caretakership who have experienced unthinkable circumstances leading to their death and whose remains were placed in unmarked graves. We are mapping a way forward to bring peace to those missing children, their families, and their communities. We will follow the evidence as it is disclosed. We will follow the science while we pay heed to what oral telling survivors share with us. With that, it is my honor to call forward the ground penetrating radar specialist, Dr. Sarah Bellew from the University of Fraser Valley, to present the findings from the investigation that she conducted on behalf of the Kamloops de Schwabmak. Keep going. Okay, do I keep going? There you go. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Dr. Sarah Beaulier. I'm a faculty associate in the Community Health and Social Innovation Hub at the University of the Fraser Valley. I would like to acknowledge that the University of the Fraser Valley is located on the unceded traditional territory of the Stalo people. I was honored to be invited by the Kamloops Secwépemc based on my experience to conduct the survey of ground penetrating radar, also known as GPR. I'm closing in on a decade of work using GPR within a burial context. My experience with GPR has been used in both Indigenous cemeteries as well as city cemeteries. I have also been called upon by the Canadian First World War Interment Recognition Fund to locate unmarked prisoner of war burials as part of Canada's first national interment operations. In fact, the GPR that was used for this survey was provided by the Canadian First World War Interment Recognition Fund to help complete important work such as this. I've been asked to present the findings of this preliminary investigation. In order to do so, I will first discuss the cultural protocols pertinent to this investigation. I will then provide you with the information pertaining to the specific survey locations. Next, I will discuss the use of GPR within a burial context and present some of the common burial features that are used to make these determinations. I will also provide you with the technical slides that will present the data from the site and take you through the analysis of how these subsurface anomalies became targets of interest. And finally, I will present my findings, analysis, and discuss a path forward. From the outset of this preliminary survey, it was important to include community members in the design, the process, interpretation, and review of this investigation. This meant that incorporating Indigenous values, ceremonies, and methods was an essential part of this process. Cultural protocols took place prior to, during, and after the survey was completed, while oral histories from knowledge keepers and cultural monitors guided the specific survey locations. I would like to pay my respects to the cultural monitors and the knowledge keepers whom were present to monitor, provide oral histories, as well as the requisite ceremonies. Cultural protocols are as equally important as the science behind GPR. And given the nature and sensitivity of this work, one cannot be done without the other. It is important to note that remote sensing, such as GPR, is not necessary to know that children went missing in the Indian residential school context. This fact has been recognized by Indigenous communities for generations. Evidence has existed in government and church archives for more than a century. Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report identified between 4,000 and 6,000 missing children, but anticipated that these actual numbers would be much greater. All residential school landscapes are likely to contain burials of missing children. Remote sensing, such as GPR, merely provides some spatial specificity to this truth. Between May 21st and 24th, 7,000 square meters of land, just under 2 acres, was covered in the location of the apple orchard at the Secwepemc Museum and Heritage Park. This area of interest was chosen for the survey based on a number of factors. First, the knowledge keepers' oral histories that recall children as young as 6 years old being woken in the night to dig holes for burials in the apple orchard. Second, a juvenile rib bone that surfaced in the same area. Third, a juvenile tooth that was excavated from a shovel test pit during an impact assessment conducted by Simon Fraser University's archaeology department. A juvenile tooth is not an indicator of loss of life, but given both discoveries, the possibility should not be discounted. As a preliminary assessment, this project sought to first ascertain the likelihood of human burials within the study area. Second, begin a preliminary assessment of the possible locations of specific burials. And finally, develop steps to further this work in order to confirm the number and location of possible burials. In GPR terminology, a subsurface anomaly refers to any irregularity noted below the surface, while a target of interest suggests that the anomaly has an increased index of suspicion for being the object of the search. As a preliminary assessment, the GPR was conducted in prospection mode. This means ranging across the study zone, following the guidance of the community members, capturing anomalies as screenshots in the digital video logger, and flagging anomaly locations on the ground for further investigation. In addition, grid surveys were conducted for in-depth study as a trial for recommended next steps. When surveying specifically for burials, there are a number of factors that we must take into account during the analysis of GPR data for subsurface anomalies. The type of burial, whether it be casket, a vault, or natural, will result in notable differences in the reflection signatures, while a casket can be further differentiated based on the material that's used, typically wood or metal. The date of the burial will also affect whether the casket is intact or has deteriorated or collapsed. Further, when surveying for natural burials with no casket, one must pay attention to the very subtle soil disturbances reflected in the data. While the depth of the burials can change based on age at time of death and the season in which the burials were dug, typically shallow graves for smaller burials such as juveniles and frozen ground prior to mechanical excavation would also affect the burial depths. Thus, when a grave was dug in the winter, prior to the use of machinery, the depth of the grave was limited by the challenge in penetrating frozen ground. The common features of a formal burial in a cemetery setting typically include a convex reflective pattern at the upper surface of a grave shaft, vertical refractive patterns at the sides of the grave shaft, a horizontal reflective pattern at the base of the grave, and also a range of possible reflective patterns for the contents of the grave. These features are not exclusive to burials. However, in areas where burials are expected, they can act as preliminary confirmation of the likelihood that burials exist and of their specific locations. This slide provides you with a visual of GPR data acquired within a typical Canadian cemetery context with formal burials. This is not data from the Kamloops Indian residential site. The gray screen on the right with the two red lines running through it is known as a radargram. This is what we see on our GPR screens while we are in the field. On this screen, we can see the signature hyperbolic response of an adult burial 1.8 meters below the surface. This hyperbolic response correlates with the adult burial in the blue screen on the left. The blue screen on the left is recorded in slice view and exemplifies a grid system conducted in 25 centimeter transects. This provides a bird's eye view moving incrementally below the surface where one can view the entire gridded section at once. In this case, an adult burial on the right and a child's burial on the left. It should be noted that the colors on this screen are arbitrary. Typically, dark blue represents the areas with no soil disturbance, while red represents areas with the deepest level of soil disturbance. Thank you. The total number of burials of missing children at the Kamloops Indian Residential School landscape is currently unknown, as this was a preliminary investigation. My report identifies some of these probable locations. There remain over 160 acres that still require surveying before these numbers can be finalized. From my preliminary findings in May to today's results, reports providing additional information related to disturbances from archaeological impact assessments, as well as construction in parts of this area, were subsequently provided to me. These reports were reviewed in order to determine which of these locations overlapped with the GPR survey areas. After this review, it was determined that there remain 200 targets of interest in these preliminary results. Again, here, I must indicate that this is the first part of an investigation with a knowing and oral histories that tells us that there remain much more work to be done. The following 4 slides present examples of some of the data images from this investigation. I will use them to help illustrate the process of data and responses. I will also provide some illustrative highlights on these graphics that indicate some of the signature responses used in determining why these subsurface anomalies are targets of interest. In the following slides, I will call the targets of interest probable burials as they demonstrate multiple GPR characteristics of burials, but only forensic investigation with excavation will be able to conclusively determine this. In the following screen captures, the x-axis indicates the length scanned on the surface, while the y-axis indicates the depth of anomalies below the surface. In each of the following screen captures, you will also notice a faint gray dot marked under each of these probable burials. This was a mark that I had placed on my GPR screen in the field in order to make note of these particular anomalies for further analysis. On this slide, the probable burial is located to the right of your screen. The probable burial contains multiple GPR characteristics of a burial. First, the orange semicircle indicates the convex reflective pattern of the upper surface of the grave shaft that lies approximately 0.7 meters below the surface. The red arrows indicate the vertical refractive patterns of the sides of the grave shaft. Above this, a surface depression can also be seen above the potential grave shaft. Surface depressions are common at known cemetery sites. Depressions occur over time when the loose soil used to fill a burial shaft compacts or when a coffin eventually collapses. Now let me take you to the middle part of the screen capture.
So we'll have more to say when it's appropriate to do so, but perhaps Dr. New wants to add something in terms of measures again at the border and how scientific and epidemiological indicators help inform those decisions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Blanc. I would just add that you're right. We continue to monitor the science, the data, the experience from other countries, and there's a lot that goes into the mix. Even looking at the indicators, the data in terms of case rates, hospitalizations, what the impact might be of variants, and so on. We're using modeling and other types of expertise to give us sort of the best understanding of what may potentially happen, depending on what policies are put in place at the border. And then we give our best advice, obviously a cabinet confidence to our ministers, and then at the end of the day, as we all know, it's elected officials that make the final decision. So that's how I would frame in terms of our role and what we do as public health experts. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. My second question, Dr. New, this is probably best for you. A few weeks ago, Ocugen, I believe is the name of the company, excuse me for pronouncing it wrong if I did, through its Canadian partner, Vacigen, submitted an application for approval for its COVID vaccine, which is being used in other countries, but our federal government has not purchased itself. So far, travelers that can return to Canada while dodging quarantine can only do so when they've been fully vaccinated with a Health Canada approved vaccine. So I'm wondering, to your knowledge, is this why this company has applied for approval? So recipients of its vaccine, whether they're Canadian right now or later on, presumably they would be able to come to Canada without strict restrictions. And is this something that other companies, vaccine makers, even if Canada hasn't bought their vaccine, should be doing to make things easier for those who have received it?
Okay, well, thank you very much for the question. I think if I were to distill it down, I think it's not maybe specifically in terms of any single company, putting a submission to Health Canada as our regulator. I think the issue really is about when we talk about fully vaccinated individuals and what would be sort of acceptable from a Canadian perspective in terms of recognizing full vaccination with any type of vaccine for those travelers coming to Canada, and that's a live issue right now. And I think with the previous question, we're having discussions actively, obviously at the international level. I think in Canada we're looking very closely. right now, obviously, the posture is that it's with what we call Health Canada approved vaccines. But I think certainly we're thinking that it's beyond that we need to look think globally and look at maybe what's happening at the international level with the WHO and the so-called WHO approved list of sort of approved vaccines. And so in terms of accepting vaccines that have also been, let's say, approved by a WHO, that's certainly part of our thinking consideration as we move forward. So I think rather than getting to the ins and outs of individual companies making applications that the Health Canada, of course, there's always a regulatory aspect, and at the end of the day, we need to make sure that it's aligned with our regulatory regimes to the extent that it's needed. But I think conceptually, I would say that I think we're looking more now at sort of a more international collaboration and also international consensus in terms of what vaccines could or should be accepted by all countries for travelers who have been vaccinated with one of those, let's say, in this case, WHO-approved vaccines.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. New. And operator, I'll pass it over to you for the last question. Donc, Béatrice, à vous pour la dernière question aujourd'hui.
Thank you. Merci. Our last question, la dernière question, is from Shai Davidi with Sportsnet. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Thank you. This question is for Dr. New and Minister LeBlanc. If you have anything to add, please do. I'm wondering where the Blue Jays application for a national interest exemption currently lies and what concerns may prevent it from gaining approval.
It's Dr. New. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Dr. New.
I'm just going to say, Minister LeBlanc, that yes, I've been part of obviously a team at the Public Health Agency, but obviously it's not just the Public Health Agency alone, but other departments as well. But we have reviewed the submission by the Blue Jays for that national interest exemption, looking at it from a sort of public health perspective, as we always do for all of these other submissions. And as you can appreciate, what we see is that the submission by the Blue Jays would look at, quote, resuming at a certain point, sort of the regular season based in Toronto, which would then obviously involve cross-border travel for, home stands and then going for road trips as well. From a pure sort of assessment of the protocols, there's been a lot of good back and forth because based on their initial submission of protocols, we obviously have had some recommendations to be sort of made to back to the Blue Jays, and they've been very open and willing to take those recommendations on. And I would say that it's all done in sort of good faith. I would also say it's not as simple as what does this mean for the Blue Jay players, because obviously it's not the players themselves alone, it's their whole entourage. You got maybe families involved. There's also looking at making sure that provincial and local authorities are also supportive and so on. So I would say it's trending in a very good direction at this point. We're looking at sort of, I would say last details, but at this point, I would say there aren't any showstoppers or anything that we really can't sort of continue to discuss and move forward on. So I can't give you a date in terms of when a possible decision would be made for the NIE or national interest exemption, but I would say that in terms of the discussions from a public health perspective, they've been going very well.
Yeah, and perhaps